And so if you look at this game, so this is the way a Calibeth was shipped. The retail price was, just under $35. My royalties was about $5 a piece, and they sold 30,000 copies. So if you do that math, that's $150,000 that I got paid as a high school senior for 7 weeks of after-school time. At a time when my father's income as an astronaut was $65,000 a year. Jeez. So I doubled or tripled my dad's income with some after-school time. And so that's what started it. And by the way, it's been downhill ever since.
Video games are always morphing. As technology, as a medium, and as a form of entertainment, they are in a constant state of change. Yet they are still very young. And because of this, there are still people around who have seen them evolve up close, all the way from their inception to the shape they take today. Richard Garriott is one of those people. His name now rests on the periphery of the video game lexicon, but his influence is everywhere. He created the first Ultima in 1981, and the series later set precedents for things we take for granted today. Tiled graphics, party-based combat, ethical decisions, and the use of a larger narrative around the mechanics of a game. He worked on Ultima Online, a title that defined and popularized online multiplayer RPGs. He also paved the way for immersive sims, games that blend first-person mechanics and role-playing systems in a cohesive world. Garriott's work influenced young developers who grew up to make games today. Harvey Smith and Rafael Colantonio are two such people. In several cases, they worked with Garriott on immersive sims, the kind of game they all shared a passion for. And with titles such as Arx Fatalis, Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, Dishonored, Dishonored 2, and Prey, Arkane is seen as the torchbearer of modern immersive sims. To understand the state of the genre today, we traveled a few miles from Arkane's Austin studio to speak to Richard Garriott, whose experience in the industry predates most developers around today.
If you look back at the earliest days, some of the stuff that's directly behind me, the machines were very primitive, but you also did it mostly by yourself. You worked alone. In these early games, I was the artist to the degree that it had art. The designer, the programmer, the writer, whatever it was, including often making the packaging and shipping it, and copying the discs at home to put in the bags. That was, you did it all. And there was sort of this kind of almost, I would say, golden age, this real renaissance, especially in the genre of role-playing, that I think is exemplified by the heydays of Origin, when people like myself had the opportunity to work with Warren, Doug Church, Paul Neurath, and Rafael Colantonio. Many, or if not most of us, had actually done some solo, made games independently as an individual, but then we began to, not only build larger teams, but work often in collaboration with each other to kind of really push the art form in a significant way. I would at least try to describe myself, and I think the other folks are too, Tolkien-style developers. And I use that term in that, Tolkien would write backstories and histories and think about his worlds in great depth long before he ever wrote the final story. And you can feel that. You can feel that when you read a Tolkien book, you can feel that this guy really does know what's around every boulder and under every creek and the history of every ruin that's in the settings that he's created. Once you figure out what your reality does consistently, then you develop a plot that leads you through exploring that reality. One of my game design principles that I encourage here within our own team is not that it has to be a simulation of a true reality, it just has to be consistent. And it has to be logical. And the example I would give is, let's suppose right now, you and me, we're in this building, the building is on fire, and we have to get out or we're in trouble. Well, of course, the first thing we're gonna try to do is go to the door. Well, let's suppose the door is locked. Well, if the door is locked, we might notice the hinges in this case are on the inside, so we might knock those out with a screwdriver and then can take the door off. Well, if that doesn't work, well, there's glass beside those, we can probably break through the glass. Well, if that was the wire kind of glass, the next thing I might think of is this is an acoustic drop ceiling. We might be able to pop off a tile and go over, unless that's one of the firewall pieces, in which case we might not. Then we'd go, okay, how about an exterior window? But if the drop is too far, then we'd go, it's okay, it's a sheetrock wall, let's break through the wall. There's this deductive process that you go through because we are familiar with the consistent implementation of reality. And so one of the things that I'm quite big on in the games we create is don't mislead players to thinking of, to think that something might work and don't deliver it working. And conversely, if players do think of a way that should logically work, let's make sure that we fulfill that.
This in particular sings to me. I mean, I use this example all the time. I don't know if I got it from you or not. But if you see a telephone on it, why put a telephone on a desk if it's just a prop? You should be able to use it. If there's a cannon, you should be able to use it. And the importance of simulation as a design tool. Very, very big.
The farther back in gaming history you look, the more you see it is purely game mechanics and art that sell. And by the way, you do need really great game mechanics, and it absolutely helps to have great art. So I'm not knocking either one of those. Those are foundationally really important. But a great story, a great reason to be there is also profoundly important. And I think that's what games need to do, is push people out of their comfort zones, hold a mirror up to their closely held beliefs, and help them grow as individuals. I got in, as many do, into the game industry about the age of 19. Is when I published my first game. I'd been making a few on my own ahead of that. And while that is not unusual, what was unusual is there was no one before me. That there were 2 or 3 other 19-year-olds like me who got in at about the same time as I did, plus or minus a couple of years. But pretty much through my whole career, I've been the oldest guy in the industry. And when you're 19 and 20 and 25, that doesn't seem like that big a deal, other than just to note that, hey, the new kids are getting in, and so the industry's getting bigger. But now at the age of 55, it's actually kind of this amazing feeling to just go back and go, like the word avatar. Most people who are graduating from school don't know where the word avatar came from. Well, it came from right there. 3D graphics in a role-playing game, right here. Boxes, right there. It's all this sort of stuff, not only happened in my lifetime, but I've had the chance to participate in many of those incremental steps. We're sharing pieces of fiction, we're sharing artifacts within our games, and we're all kind of doing pieces of homage to the things we've done in the past, so that the people that do know where we've come from can feel that sense of continuity and feel that sense of the depth of the truth of this reality simulation we're doing that goes back, frankly, through the entire span of gaming.
Garriott's prolific career in video games allowed him other pursuits as well.
I've done really well in gaming, but I've blown it all on space.
He took part in the first zero-G wedding. He's garnered fame for being a self-funded astronaut, boarding the International Space Station in October of 2008, 35 years after his father did the same.
This is Richard Garriott coming to you from the International Space Station.
But today, Garriott continues working on games. His current project is Shroud of the Avatar, a spiritual successor to the Ultima series that molded RPGs all those years ago. It's a continuation of the work he did alongside those developers in the 80s and 90s, people who shared a passion for a certain kind of game that, back then, was ahead of its time. In the end, though, Garriott's history, eclectic and accomplished as it is, only fills out one side of the story. And that brings us here, to the other side, on the outskirts of Austin, to the place where another immersive sim is being made. And across the street, in a house lined with memorabilia of a storied life, we found Warren Spector.
I'm really insane. Oh, man.
Well, you have 10,000 more of these next door, don't you?
Yes, I do. I have 10,000 books, all of them cataloged, amazingly enough, over at the library, which is up the street, where we're working on System Shock 3 right now. And I've got, this is the graphic novels and comic book section. And then over in the house I live in next door are about 3,000 film and television books.
Like Garriott, Spector's name has faded from the video game industry foreground in recent years. But, like Garriott, Spector's influence can still be seen everywhere.
I am a 33-year veteran of game development, and it kind of blows my mind when I think about that. Someday you will all be 33-year veterans and wondering where the time went.
Especially in the work of Arkane Studios, Bethesda, and Irrational Games. It's also present in Metal Gear Solid 5 and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Games that stress emergent gameplay over tightly scripted set-piece moments. This thread of emergent gameplay runs through Origin Systems, where Spector worked as a producer on several of Garriott's Ultima games, as well as System Shock and Ultima Underworld.
Hacker begins unauthorized entry. into the Tri-Optimum corporate network.
He would later become general manager at Looking Glass Austin, where he oversaw the early stages of Thief before he began his seminal work on Deus Ex at Ion Storm.
Let it spill over into the schools and churches. Let the bodies pile up in the streets. In the end, they'll beg us to save them.
When Eidos Interactive closed Ion Storm, Spector moved on to form Junction Point Studios, the team behind Epic Mickey.
It was such an amazing experience working with guys like Paul Neurath and Doug Church and Tim Stelmach and Harvey Smith. We were all, kind of young punks out to change the world. And, we had these ideas that we just needed to explore. It wasn't like we wanted to, or we kind of thought, yeah, it might be cool. It was a need. We had no choice. We did have an influence. We had an influence on other developers, which was really part of the point for me when I was working on Deus Ex. I shouldn't say this out loud, but I wanted to shame other developers so they could never make the kinds of games that they were making again, And I think we did have that kind of influence. So you just see more people doing it. There's that. The tools are much better now. The simulation in System Shock was not deep, let's just say. And in the Ultima games, it was not deep. We did the best we could for the time, but now you can build, physics simulations and tools that are just immensely powerful. And so players can get deeper into the experience. And also, I think gamers have matured. There's this myth that games are just for kids. That's never been true. They've grown up on games like System Shock and Underworld and Thief and Deus Ex. They grew up with that kind of game. Their expectations change. They're tired, I think, of games that are tight. I was going to say they're tired of games that were tightly scripted. There's still a huge market for games that are incredibly tightly scripted. But I think a lot of players just want more. They want more control over their experience.
Welcome back to Citadel Station. We hope your somnolent healing stage went well. Today is the 6th day of November, year 2072. You are currently in the healing suites located on the first level.
I have mixed feelings about the whole explosion of immersive simulation and emergent gameplay. On the one hand, I'm thrilled about it because it means I have more games to play. And I really have always believed that, if you're going to honor a medium and grow a medium and mature a medium, you kind of have to do what it does that no other medium can do. And emergent gameplay and shared authorship is what we do that no other medium can do. I mean, movies can't do it, books can't do it, opera can't do it, We do that. On the one hand, I'm thrilled that people have finally caught on. You look at the Bethesda games now, you look at what Irrational was doing, you look at what Arkane is doing, you look at what BioWare is doing, and you see the roots are in the work that Origin and Looking Glass and later Ion Storm and Junction Point were doing. You can see the influence. I guess my ego is out of control now, I don't know, but I can see the influence, and I'm really excited about that. And then there's, on the other hand, this intense frustration that they get all the credit, Emergence is kind of a standard way to think about things in software development now. But when we started working on these games at Origin and then at Looking Glass, no one else was doing that. Everything was scripted in games up to that point. And we started playing around with emergence and games that were designed to not just encourage or allow, but really kind of force players to solve problems in their own ways. We would look at each other and say, why isn't everybody making games like this? This is what games do that no other medium can do. I mean, why isn't everybody doing this? And now here it is, 20 years later, kind of everybody's doing it. It's kind of cool. lot of people expect me to be really upset that other people are now doing this kind of game. Or especially Deus Ex. Man, I get asked all the time, aren't you upset that someone else is making Deus Ex games? And it's like, no. The idea that we were part of something bigger than ourselves, that, you know, Deus Ex has a life of its own beyond me and beyond the team, that's nothing but cool. It's like watching a kid grow up, you know, and leave home and become an adult. It's nothing but good. I'm loving the fact that, you know, Steve Gaynor and Harvey in particular, since I worked with Harvey for so long, you know, seeing what he's doing now, he's doing way better than I ever did. You know, these guys are way smarter than we were, and like I said, they have better tools. It's nothing but great to see people, you know, the new generation of developers appreciating and carrying on the tradition.
Today, Spector's career has come full circle. He's here in Austin again, working on System Shock 3 with Other Side Entertainment. Across the country, just outside of Boston, Spector's longtime friend and colleague Paul Neurath is making Underworld Ascendant. In many ways, they're picking up where they left off, with the games that sparked their passion for development to begin with. Spector worked closely with Harvey Smith on Deus Ex in 2000, before the studio closed and before Smith joined Arcane. It was here where Smith would learn the intricacies and difficulties of creating immersive sims, and it only fueled his creativity. In a larger sense, Smith's design sensibilities and passion for games comes from Spector and the lessons he passed down.
It was great having Harvey on the team. Deus Ex would not have been what it was without Harvey. I'm not sure System Shock would have been what it was without Harvey. You know, Harvey was one of the testers on System Shock back in the 90s. I remember, you know, we would work pretty crazy hours then. Still do, but it was really insane then. And you know, it'd be 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'd go down to where QA was testing the game, and Harvey would be the last guy there. And I'd go, wait a minute, what's going on? Everybody went home, but except for Harvey. And we would sit there and we would talk about games, and we would talk about System Shock, and we would talk about immersive simulation.
Because I felt like Warren was more like me in one sense, that you know, film and books, you know, and pen and paper RPGs were very important to you and had transformed your life in some way. And so I really grew a lot in that 10 months, you know. And by the end, I was lead tester, and you know, Warren was talking about recruiting me into his producer group. I
got a real sense of his design chops. Not just the quality, but the way he thought about games. And so the first opportunity I had, I brought him into my producer group at Origin as an associate producer. The first project we worked on together was a game called Cybermaid.
Only the strong deserve to live. The weak must.
Eventually, Harvey wanted to work on a different kind of game, and so I took that back, and he started working on his own stuff. I was able to put him in a creative leadership position and saw him do wonderful things. I mean, he's a great, charismatic, talented leader, so he was able to lead teams, and I knew what kind of games he wanted to make, which was exactly the kind of games I wanted to make. And so I tried to support him as much as I could.
You recognized me in a way that was very useful to my whole development. You know, my boss would come to me and go, you know, Warren came by today and he was asking if he could have you for his next project. And Richard Garriott came by and he said that, are you free to move into development to do this TDA grunt work, you know? And
technical design assistant, by the way.
Which, yeah, and the programmers refer to as total dumbass, by the way.
Yeah, well. But he left Origin, went off to another company out on the West Coast, and I had to get him back. I just had to. And so he was visiting Austin, and we went to a Mexican restaurant, and I knew the booth we were sitting in. I knew we were going to make Deus Ex. I needed a lead designer. You know, I convinced him to move back to Austin to be the lead designer on Deus Ex.
We have the situation under control, Agent.
Stay out of town, bro. Bad shit going down.
How long has it been? I've been now working on games for 33 years. In September, it'll be 34 years. It's been an amazing adventure, I gotta say. It's been a great career, you know. I hope it continues to be a great career for many years to come. You know, I dropped out of a PhD program to make games, and my mother cried for 10 years. I swear, she just cried constantly for 10 years. Gave up a great career in teaching to make games, you know. But I've been the luckiest guy in the world, you know. I've gotten to do what I love. I've gotten to work with the most amazing people I can imagine working with. I've gotten to work on things that are bigger than me, you know, that have a life of their own. I look back and I wouldn't change a thing.
Maybe it's because of how young the medium is or how constantly it changes, but we can often forget the past, where all of this started and how we got here. Spector and Garriott are two such reminders of those origins. Their work began in Austin and Massachusetts and branched outward, across the country, to numerous titles that have become mainstays in the video game zeitgeist. Projects such as BioShock, Half-Life, Gone Home, and the original Xbox all spawned from those same roots at Looking Glass and Origin Systems. Developers are always looking for new ways to push games forward, but it's not happening in a vacuum. People such as Spector have spent their careers finding like-minded individuals, learning from them, and growing alongside them. Along the way, they might run into a Smith or a Cole Antonio and pass those lessons on. And that brings us back to the present, to the Arcane Studios we know today. Although the first Dishonored was the team's breakout hit, it was only the beginning of a new chapter in the studio's history. And as they move forward into uncertain territory, they're being forced to re-examine their identity several times over.